I was 6 years old when my father walked into my room and called me by my name in Farsi, Fereshte. We're going on a camping trip for 5 days, and we're leaving in a few days. And it would be me and my oldest brother who get to go. At the time, we lived on the base in Tehran, and my father was a pilot during the Iran-Iraq War. So it would be thrilling to get to hang out with him. A few days later, my mom helped me pack a very light bag with a couple of my favorite things, including my favorite shirt and my favorite doll. We went to my aunts and uncle's house in Karaj. I remember we got on this big yellow bus, and I ran to the back of the bus and through the window waved goodbye to my mom and my 2 little brothers, who were 3 and 1.5 at the time, not realizing the significance of that moment. We went to another town, and we actually met up with another family with a mom and a dad and 2 girls around my age. How exciting. More people to come with us on a camping trip. We spent a couple nights at their house and eventually got in the car and went to the Kurdish border, where it was nighttime. My father pulled over, and I could sense that there was probably danger around because he told me to be very quiet and still. Being born into the Iran Revolution and living on a base where I would hear sirens on a regular basis and have to evacuate the apartment building I lived in and have to lay outside as I watched the missiles go over my head, I was used to following orders. As daylight came and it felt like there was no more danger around us, we started to travel again, and we went to this town where we met with these men who looked intimidating because they had these big weapons across their chest. And they had horses and mules with them. And I remember my dad getting out of the car and starting to talk to them. And they started laughing, making jokes, and telling stories. So they must have been friends. And I just thought, the more the merrier. He picks me up and he puts me on this mule that had just kicked this other guy and threw this other one off, and places me on there. And the mule must have liked me. And my dad said, "See, Fereshte, this is your mule." And we started on our adventure. My dad stood tall, with dark hair, beautiful smile, and a witty, charming personality. And along the way, all he did was make everyone comfortable and laugh at his jokes. We would go from one village with tents to another village with sometimes clay houses. And each time we would leave, we would try to find a new destination to go to where it would be safe, because sometimes we would hear that the last place we were at had just got bombed, and we would sometimes see the bodies being carried away. But my dad still tried to make it an adventure. In the daytimes, he would take us to the rivers where we would bathe, and even though the bombs fell, we went to the waterfalls. And in the daytime, I would see the mountains that looked so close. I would say, "Daddy, are we almost there yet?" He would say, "Almost." But they were days away. And in the nighttime, when all the stars would be out, I would look up and my dad would tell me all about the universe. And he would carry me on his back on piggyback rides and teach me the multiplication table and even some words in English. I remember we finally got to this one town where it looked more modern than the rest. And I started to wonder, I wonder when I'm going to see my mom and my 2 little brothers. And I would ask my dad, but he wouldn't really give me a precise answer. But we stayed in this town, and we even built a little community. And we stayed in a house with a nice roof, and we would go on top of the roof and hang out with some of the locals. And my brother even started working at the local kebab shop. And then one day I remember the desperation and the stress on the adults' faces around me as Iraqi military men pulled up outside, and they had some uniformed vehicles with them, and I heard my dad trying to explain how we were not the enemies and we were just seeking refuge. At this point, I finally kind of put it together that we were never on a camping trip. My dad had planned this escape for months before we left Iran. He had hoped to get to Turkey, where he would hopefully eventually bring my brother and my mom. But we didn't make it that far. So here we were, not able to convince these military men, and my dad telling me to get in the car quickly, and we all did. And we were taken to this place, and I remember one of the women that was with us screaming and yelling when she saw the bars on the window and the walls all around us as we walked through the door, huge, tall walls. I knew I was in a prison. And then we were escorted to this little rooms with bars on the window, and our doors were shut. No plumbing, no water, just a mattress on the floor, and darkness at night like I'd never seen before. My father started making friends with some of the guards and somehow eventually convinced them to let us have aerobics classes outside on this big concrete field. And every day the classes would get bigger and bigger as it brought hope to people. And I remember he even let me lead these classes. And then he somehow convinced them to let us use one of the bigger rooms that they would host larger groups of attainees to host an Esperanto class. And now we're learning another language. And the International Red Cross would come visit, I remember, here and there. And after a year of being there, it was finally our turn. And I remember leaving that prison and the stark difference of this modern hotel with lighting and plumbing. And eventually, we got to go on a real airplane and go to Spain, where we stayed with my aunt until we got the okay to come to Seattle, where we were reunited with my mom and two little brothers. People often ask me about my leaving Iran and my journey as a refugee, and I tell them how grateful I am for my father. In the midst of the war and the bombs and the bodies and the prison, he provided my brother and I with a sense of comfort and safety and even joy. He showed me that even during our hardest times, how we carry ourselves and how we help others is truly what matters the most.